How do you go from constantly having to prove your value to becoming an essential part of your organization? Is there a secret to changing the perception of service design from a nice to have to a necessary organizational capability? Welcome back to our special series where we explore the real lived experiences of the professionals who are designing services from the inside. This series is all about pulling back the curtain, moving beyond the polished case studies to learn from the real, raw, on the ground insights and hard won lessons of those who are in the trenches. Hi, awesome that you've tuned in again to the Service Design Show. While I love bringing you the wisdom from some of the most well-known pioneers in service design, I am just as passionate about spotlighting the practitioners doing the crucial day-to-day work of improving the services we all use. These are the professionals who truly understand the gap between theory and the messy reality of getting things done. This conversation is the next in our deep dive into the world of in-house service design. For this episode, I am joined by two inspiring guests, Sara Langston and Nancy Samayoa. Both are working as professionals on the inside and also members of my Circle community, where they recently hosted a great community discussion. If you are not familiar with the Circle, it is the community for in-house service design leaders and those who aspire to be. I started it a few years ago because I know that driving change from within an organization can sometimes feel like a lonely mission. The Circle is designed to be your team of allies, a place to find support, share challenges, and grow with your peers. If that sounds interesting, you can learn more about the community at servicedesignshow.com/circle. The link is also in the show notes. So in this episode, you will hear from Sara and Nancy. We explore their surprising journeys into service design, coming from backgrounds in local government administration and architecture. We unpack the key takeaways from their Circle sessions, exploring how we can make service design an organizational habit and avoiding getting stuck in the endless proof stage of design maturity. And we get into the nitty-gritty of what it really takes to move the needle, including why service design can sometimes be seen as a threat and how to redefine success by celebrating the small, invisible wins. So if you are ready for some honest stories and practical wisdom that you will not find in a textbook, you've come to the right place. I am your host, Mark Fontijn, and you are listening to the Service Design Show. Welcome to the show, Sara and Nancy.
Hey, Mark.
Hi.
Nice to have you on. We're doing a new episode of Inside Service Design. I've been really enjoying the past conversations with fellow Circle members who are in-house service design professionals. Today we are going to explore your worlds, what you're doing, learn a little bit about the topics you brought to our dinner table discussions, and we'll also wrap up with some lessons learned. But before we get into all of that, I would love to start with some questions about your context. So maybe, Sara, we can start with you. To kick us off, could you tell us a little bit about your journey into in-house service design? Like, what were some of the milestones that got you to where you are today?
Sure. Well, first, thank you for having me on the show. This is an absolute honor. In terms of my journey, I can say this time 2 years ago, I didn't know what service design was. When I started in my career, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to be part of helping people. But maybe I wasn't really cut out for those kind of direct helping people jobs like being a nurse or a social worker. I kind of guessed that wasn't really for me. So I ended up doing admin in like local government, and one of the first jobs I ended up in, I was looking after a directory of local health and care services. Um, and I think the thinking was that there's a lot of services out there to help people, but they might not necessarily know where to get that support. And there's a lot of kind of difficult situations that people go through in life that maybe they don't need to if they have support a bit earlier. Um, so my job was to keep this directory up to date and go around sharing it with people, telling people how it worked. And the first thing I learned in that job really was that a directory isn't the solution to that, which is awkward because it was my whole job. But then it got me really curious about what is the solution and how did we get to a directory as the solution when it clearly doesn't work. And almost every local authority in the UK at the time had one that was the same. So that became a bit of a obsession of mine, sort of just trying to find the answers to those questions. And eventually it led me to how do services get designed? How do they get created? How can you do it really well? Um, and it eventually led to me discovering service design as a profession about 2 years ago and finding a job that was doing it in a national health charity where I went, yeah, I want to do that. I want to go help this health charity help people access brilliant services and feel better. So that was my roundabout way into service design.
How easy or hard did you find it to migrate into this whole service design space?
Easier than I thought, because I think I was doing it already. What I realized when I looked up those job descriptions was, oh yeah, oh well, talking to people about what their experience is like and researching how it could be better. Yeah, I've done a bit of that. Ideation, doing facilitating workshops with people. I've done a lot of that, and designing journeys. I did part of when I was in that job when I was trying to figure out how can we help people? What is the solution? I went back to uni and I did a master's in marketing. Because just the thinking at the time was, well, if Coca-Cola can get people to rot their teeth, surely we can, use the same tricks to get people to come to a falls prevention class, right? Um, so yeah, I went and did that. And one of the things I came across that I really took away, I think, was a kind of model of consumer decision making, which kind of says you have to recognize there's something you want to change, and then you have to consider your options, and then you have to choose an option, weigh up the different options, choose one, and then you have to kind of take action to go and purchase that thing. And I realized that was the journey people were taking, and our directory solved a little bit of that, but not all of it. And so that kind of became the basis of journey mapping for me. That then when I saw that in the job description, I was like, I'm doing a bit of that. So I just went and applied for a couple of jobs, and I had some awkward interviews where I was like, oh, I'm really sorry, I'm not actually a service designer and I haven't been to service design school. And I've just sort of been, I can tell you about some projects where I think I've been doing a little bit of this. And they were like, yeah, no, you are actually doing it. And actually, one of the interviews, the hiring manager said, no, we get a lot of that. A lot of people. And then since joining the circle, I found that, yeah, that's true. A lot of people come to service design in a similar roundabout way. Do you find that, Mark?
Absolutely. Well, I think there's just a small percentage of people who went to official service design school, and the rest of us stumbled into it. I think the great thing we should applaud you for is to nevertheless still apply for those jobs. I think that's the message here, even though you don't feel like you have the title and maybe well, you had the experience, but still, nevertheless, apply. Thanks, Sarah. That's really interesting to hear that background. Also, doing a marketing master's. Nancy, does this overlap somehow with your experience of getting into service design, or have you been to classic service design school?
Yeah, no, it absolutely overlaps. And I didn't go to classic service design school, although I went to classic design school. So I came from a architecture background actually, and was doing my master's in architecture, and kind of pretty quickly realized I didn't ever want to become an architect. And so, yeah, I guess once I completed my studies, I then kind of went into the teaching and learning side of architecture. So was really kind of looking at student experience, but from an educational perspective. And so what classes, how we were teaching in architecture school, and then also what services were required for students that were in the School of Architecture and Design. So looking at how they might access 3D printers and model making spaces. And so I've been doing that for a little while, working at the University of Melbourne. And maybe similar to you, Sarah, came across a job description one day and looked at it, and I think the call was just for a designer. And I was like, yeah, well, I guess I'm a designer. And I looked through the job description, and I was like, I think I can do this. And so applied for that role, and I think the uh, two amazing managers and the director that hired me must have just been like, where did you come from, and who are you? And they yeah, I was lucky enough, I guess, that they were keen to give me a shot. And what I quickly realized was that, a lot of these things like journey mapping um, and I guess trying to ground design to research and to insights, I had already been doing in architecture school, and in my practice in design, but also as a way to really ensure that we were kind of providing good student experience. And so um, yeah, it was just kind of a bit of a light bulb moment when I realized that I had for a long time been doing some of these practices that just didn't have the names to put to the activities that I was doing. And so um, really lucky that a lot of these skills are really transferable, and felt that I also was able to bring a perspective or a different way of thinking than a lot of other colleagues, and they brought theirs as well from different disciplines. And so I think one of the things, at least I enjoy as a services designer, is working with lots of people from different disciplines that really kind of enrich the thinking and add diversity into that thinking as well.
Really curious, and I'll probably introduce that question in the next episodes um, about the service design job interview. That is super interesting. But you mentioned something about the fact that the hiring managers asked you, like, where did you come from? Like, what was their surprise?
I think it was just I don't know. I think it was that I probably came into this interview pretty like gung ho. I'm just going to give this a shot, and that they were yeah. I don't know. I was like, I don't know if I'm the person for your job, but these are my skills. So
So what do you think
uh,
that what do you think was the reason that they decided to give you a shot? I don't know if there were other candidates, but like,
yeah. I'm not sure. I mean, maybe it's just my charming ways.
you should ask. That is interesting information.
I still talk to them. I might shoot them a little message. It's been a while since I've connected, so maybe that's a good excuse to connect with them.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Thanks, Nancy. I'll get back to you in a second. So Sarah, Nancy is with a university. You are with a public health organization. It's often really hard for outsiders to imagine, okay, so what are really the challenges that people like you tend to work on? Because nobody comes up with a brief, please design or redesign this service for us. So, Sarah, could you help us understand, like, what are the challenges that you're currently working on without disclosing any sensitive information?
Sure. Well, the big project I'm working on at the moment is actually one of those someone has designed a brief.
Awesome.
So maybe it's not the best example, but I suppose it shows that you can still work on something that well defined in-house. It's a big research project, so we're co-designing and then evaluating service, and so I'm leading the co-design stage, working with patients, healthcare professionals, and researchers to design what the service will be. And then it will go into a clinical trial to see how well it helps people. And there's a chance that, everyone's got their fingers crossed that if it does work as well as we think it will, that it could be rolled out and just become part of the NHS across the country. So it's a really exciting project, and it was really well defined. So we've got a really clear brief. But I think that the more typical projects that I tend to work on outside of that are a little bit more opportunistic.
Like,
I've had colleagues sort of come to me and sort of say, "Oh, I'm thinking about this and I'm not really sure where to start with it," or "We've got this opportunity." Um, Again, trying to think what I can say without giving too much away. But there was a piece of work that I did with a colleague, and she was starting to work more with healthcare professionals. We, as a charity, I think, had focused more on our beneficiaries for obvious reasons for a long time. And she was recognizing that, well, healthcare professionals are the key to our beneficiaries getting really good health services. So she wanted to really support them. And she's a nurse herself. So she really knew what the kind of challenges were for healthcare professionals and the support they might need. Um, and we just had a few chats kind of talking through it. So it was more like consultancy, that piece of work, where we were talking through, okay, what's your strategy and what are you aiming to do? And um, we ended up sort of coming up just from her insight, kind of a theory that there are like 3 moments where healthcare professionals need support. Because what we were talking about in the first conversation was that there is a lot of help out there for healthcare professionals, but there's also a lot that you need to keep up to date with. There's so much information from so many sources. So if you're thinking about your kind of clinical practice, keeping up to date with that, there's a lot of training, but there's also guidelines in like 3 different places. Um, and you're just bombarded with information all the time. And she was saying, we don't really want to compete with that and add more chaos. But we just want to be able to cut through and give support exactly when it's needed. And we figured out there's 3 moments, and we really professionally named them. We called them like the ooh moments, the ah moments, and the oh no moments. and, they were the moments where you go, oh, I should know that, but I don't. That you're going to take action. You're going to go, I need to go look that up. So we wanted to be there for that. So what are the moments where that happens? What information do you need? And how can we make it so that it's right there? And then there was a kind of the sort of the oh no, I don't know what to do next moments. I've had a really busy day, and for some reason my brain just isn't working anymore and I can't figure out the next step. So that's when we figured out, okay, we need a tool, we need something to guide you through it step by step. So where you go, okay, I've got this patient, this is what's happening, what am I supposed to do next? That it would just tell you, just spoon feed you the answer, but it needed to be obviously reliable and safe. And then there were the kind of, that's interesting kind of moments where you sort of think, I want to learn more about that. And you might take a bit more time. So we wanted the resources there for people to dig into and learn a bit. And so it was those kinds of things. Then we went and did some research with healthcare professionals to figure out what's happening in those moments and what do you need. So that was one really nice piece of work, I think, that came opportunistically out of a conversation that then turned into
yeah, yeah.
design.
That's what you see a lot as well, that people have an assumption, and usually it's based on some experience they've had in the past, and then we as service design professionals can help to figure out if that assumption is actually valid. I'm curious, one more thing, Sarah. In these projects that you describe, do people actually look for service design specifically, or is it something else that they are looking for? Like, does it have a different label? How do people approach you?
It really varies. And
Okay.
I think this is something we've talked about in the circle a lot, about kind of the ways different people understand service design, isn't it?
How is it in your current project?
In my current project, it was, we need a service designer. And so that was a big project that I was hired for. That was the big thing that they said, this is what you're going to be doing. So it was very, and then my role is very sort of specifically carved out. There's very clear role and responsibility for me. Whereas for other projects that are the more opportunistic, I tend to find some people will be, we need service design expertise. And, you know, they'll go through the usual way of kind of planning a project and saying, we need a service designer. Let's reach out to the service designer. And sometimes it will be, I need something. I don't know what it is, but I know Sarah can help me with this. And it's more interpersonal then. It's more based on the relationship. So it's a mixture, I think.
Nancy, how do people in your projects approach you? Is it we need more of that Nancy flavor, or is it we're looking for somebody who can facilitate a workshop, or is it we're looking for service design expertise? Like, tell us a little bit more about your projects.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of both. So currently, also I'm also working in the government healthcare setting as well, Sarah. So there's a little bit of a tie there. But yeah, I think look, the context that I'm working in at the moment is we have like quite a strong push from leadership to be a service design led organization, which is excellent. And so I think there is, I guess, in the organization a huge awareness that service design exists as a capability within the organization. But there's probably it's still a bit like mystified of what we actually do. And so, you know, I think when we are brought on, there is I think sometimes service design can really come across as a threat in the space that I am
How
in
so?
terms
A
of,
threat? That's interesting.
yeah, I think that was actually something that was raised in one of our circle sessions that, you know, I think a threat to having, you know, I guess a spanner put in the wheel, you know, into the cog and to kind of like turn things around, because I think we do kind of come in with a bit of a, hang on, are there other ways or perspectives to look at this problem? And I think uh, being in the government space is often really specific, already assumed ways of solving problems that look quite similar to other problems that have appeared before. And so yeah, I guess you know, that leadership support to really start to just untangle things a little bit more than you normally would. You know, if you didn't have that service design approach, is really, really important in some of these spaces that have really, really stringent kind of ways of operating for a really long time. So yeah, some of the challenges is uh, is really, I guess, um, looking at, yeah, I guess demystifying what service design is and how it links to certain outcomes. Because sometimes you might be sitting in a workshop and people are like, "Huh, what are the you know, what's the point of this?" And so I think um, some of the biggest challenges for us is really kind of linking some of those activities that we do that kind of feel like we're hitting our head against a brick wall sometimes to positive outcomes and showing that impact.
Yeah, it's always hard to thread the needle and to find causalities and correlations and be explicit about that. Usually, it's not just hard, but we don't get the time to actually do that. Like people are rushing to the next thing.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
if you haven't previously experienced, you know, I guess service design at its best, it can feel like you're going backwards to go forwards. And so trying to um, reassure and build trust that actually if we just slow down for a smidge, and that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going slower than what we
Yeah.
would have normally gone.
We had some, and this is a nice segue bridge into the topics we had at our dinner table conversations in August. So we are in the seed and scale season. Every quarter we have a new season. Right now it's seed and scale. I think both of your stories already hint to that. You both hosted a different session with a different topic. You don't know, I think, from each other which topic you addressed because you were in different groups. So this will be interesting. Sara, you co-hosted, co-facilitated a session with Phil, who was in one of the previous Inside Service Design episodes. And correct me if I'm wrong, but sort of the premise of your dinner table conversation with the group was, how do we make service design an habit, an integral part of how work is done, rather than something that needs to be invited into specific projects? Did I get that right?
Yeah, absolutely. The previous session Megan had done, where she brought us the service design maturity book. I think it's from the This is Service Design Doing book. The service design maturity model kind of lays out the stages of service design maturity in an organization. And I think what Megan had noticed in a lot of circle discussions was that it was really common to be kind of stuck at that prove stage, where you're trying to sort of raise awareness of what service design is and what it can offer, and encourage people to bring you on board and involve you. And I think, like Nancy was saying, it is a risk. And I definitely relate to what you're saying there, that it can certainly feel uncomfortable for people. So being able to persuade people that it's worth taking that risk, and that, you can get some good results out of it. We hear those stories a lot. And so her session was all about kind of understanding where you are in the model, and how to kind of get from one stage to another. So it was, we were talking about how moving from prove to the next one up, which is scale, where service design is embedded across the organization at scale. It needs practices and rituals, and it needs structures that aren't just interpersonal. It's kind of process and formality. And so we wanted to build on that and think, what are those practices? What do they look like? And maybe come out the other end with kind of a few things that each of us can take away into our organizations and ask for and put in place. So yeah, it was about, in that prove stage, kind of recognizing that a lot of it is about personal choice, is about persuading people to invite you to the party. Whereas in the scale stage, it's the way things are done, it's the expectation. So how do we get there?
Yeah, and we'll get what is it? Defer, not judgment, but the clues for a second, and get into what was discussed specifically in that session. But I think a lot of us listening will recognize this, that it feels like you're in an endless loop in that proof stage, because you're always proving. Like in the next project, you're always making another case, and you're again showing the value and communicating the value, up to the point where you're like, okay, how much proof do I need to provide? How often do we need to prove this? When does this actually become a way of working? So we'll get into some of the clues that people dropped in that session, but I want to quickly jump to you, Nancy. You frame your session quite differently. You took a garden metaphor for about growing,
Oh, that
and
was
it's
you. I
and
heard
it
about
and
that. It's brilliant.
it sparked a lot of interesting conversation. So, first of all, how did you get to the topic that you decided to address, and what happened during our session?
Yeah, I mean, how did I get to the topic? Uh, I guess it kind of came from a recent divisional day that we had in my organization, and we were asked to look at and reflect it as design maturity. And funnily enough, there we used the service design maturity model to use that. But I think that there's quite a gap in, I guess, in when applying it to government services or organisations, and also in-house. I think there's quite a link to how what you need in these specific environments for service design to thrive. And So you're right, Mark. I was not light on the metaphors for that session. They were very heavy. But what I wanted to do was look at a model that had been that has been put out by the I think Newham Council in the UK, and they have developed I think it's called the Local Government Service Design Model, but it really I guess has a couple of different characteristics that they measure, which slightly, I think sometimes these models can sometimes feel pretty similar, but what kind of stood out for me for these models is they also look at leadership endorsement and also systems awareness, which I think when you're working in-house, they're actually quite important characteristics in how service design kind of is driven or how it's inhibited. And so we, as a dinner table session, set out to test that model and just to kind of see does it kind of apply to not just government and local area organisations, but also in-house. And so we use that as a way to just, I guess, reflect on our context. And yeah.
Cool. So it makes sense that we're looking a lot at maturity models and frameworks to gauge where we are, to have some sort of benchmark. And there are different models out there. All of them, I think, are to some extent helpful. Sara, if we go back to you for a moment. So in your specific example, we took a model that Megan took from a different book. And then we zoomed in basically on the chasm, on the gap between two stages, the proof and the scale, and sort of tried to figure out why so many service design professionals fall into the gap and never come back. What were some of the most insightful moments for you about how we could potentially cross to the next side?
I think it was realizing that nobody in the session had seen service design at the scale stage. I think that was an eye-opener.
That's very scary.
And I think there were some discussions around what would that look like and how you do it. We tried to use some kind of analogous inspiration. Sort of said, what are the functions that are scaled and are expected, like finance and IT, where you get in trouble if you don't involve them, and there's things like that. So we talked about those things, and then and I think another takeaway is probably that those functions in the organization struggle too. That you don't always, they do get frustrated with people not always coming to them, and having sort of IT programs that are installed on your machine that you shouldn't have and things like that. So sort of realizing that the grass isn't always greener necessarily. And then sort of that some of them maybe they only get to be that embedded because it's legally required as well. And yeah, just kind of reflecting on kind of the difficulties of getting there, and also the kind of the balance between if you impose too much structure and if you make it really required, like you say, there's a policy, you have to involve service design at this stage and it's mandatory, then how does that work with the flexibility of service design? There are times when we might look into something and realize that no change is needed at all. So how does that fit if it's mandatory to involve service design, and how does that help with the kind of the awareness and the motivation for people to involve you?
The risk here is that it becomes a checkbox that just needs to be ticked. I've heard stories related to research or user research or co-creation where people just tick the box. But was it all gloomy and this we're never going to get to real scale? We'll always have to prove our value, or did you notice some optimism and positivity on how we could bridge that gap?
I think there was optimism around actually realizing that the proof stage isn't that bad. That, it does give you more flexibility, because then you are working with people who want to work with you because they've chosen to involve you, and they understand what you're doing, and that kind of thing. So whatever the scale stage would look like, it would need to involve some of that flexibility, and it would need to involve people really understanding the value of what you do. Um, yeah, definitely. And I think we came back round really to how to measure the value of service design and make it visible, which is another kind of mainstay of Circle, isn't it? That we talk about a lot.
Actually, one of the other 4 sessions was measuring what matters. So all these sessions are intertwined, interconnected, not surprisingly. Okay, cool. So, Sarah, in your session, was there also a specific focus on the scaling aspect, the proving aspect, or did the group zoom into something else from the maturity model that you brought forward? Oh, sorry. Did I say Sarah?
Yeah.
Sorry. I meant Nancy.
That's all right. Yeah, I mean, sorry, Mark, what was the
So the
question
question
again?
was, in Sarah's session, we specifically zoomed in on how do we get from proof to scale. I'm
Mm,
curious, in your session, did the group also zoom in on a specific stage or leap
mm.
in the maturity model, or did they approach it from a different perspective?
I think we approached it from a different perspective, I think, and I guess it was just using the different characteristics to really reflect. So I think uh, maybe something that's kind of struck a chord with me, Sarah, and Mark. You asked, was it all gloomy? Something that I didn't really realize, which maybe might have been naive of me to think of, but how quickly it kind of got pretty um, pretty heavy. Like the conversation got heavy in terms of yeah, feeling a bit disheartened that that even for some of the circle dinner table attendees that had been working really, really hard and had been, advocating for scaling design services, how it just um, didn't seem to be reflected on that in that model, and so feeling a little bit disheartened about that. And I guess where that kind of left me thinking is, yes, how do we firstly kind of use these models and reflect in a way that's still kind of not disheartening, and provides us with kind of opportunity to look forward and use them as a map to be able to really focus your attention and energy into the spaces that you want to and what you feel you need to do at the time. But also, I guess, maybe from an organizational level, like just how important it is for when you are using these models to be able to provide some scaffolds for your service design capability to kind of feel like there is support and there are actions being done and there is, endorsement to kind of move from one phase to the next phase in the scale.
When you mentioned scaffolding, like what could that
Mm.
be? What is a scaffolding that you sort of envision?
I mean, I feel like, just having some really clear milestones that you could be building towards and working towards. I think it maybe as a way to really kind of feel like you are moving forward and you are kind of the efforts in this advocating that you're doing isn't going wasted,
Mm.
is what I'm thinking. Mm.
We've been running the Circle community for over 4 years now, and I've been in a lot of conversations where um, the reality sort of sinks in and everybody wants to go faster and everybody sees the opportunity. And most of you are in situations, in contexts where you're the minority and the rest of the organization has a different mindset. So um, one of the things that I think has a lot of value, and I would love to hear from you as well, is that we recently introduced Discord server, sort of Slack, but different. And one of the things that we are doing in there is to actively encourage members to share wins. Like on a weekly
Mm,
basis, we invite members to share wins. And the thinking, the reasoning behind this is that it's so hard to see success within your organization on a longer scale.
mm,
That it's much more important that you celebrate the wins on a daily, on a weekly basis, and also learn from others. Like, how do you perceive a win? What is a win? So I'm curious, like, this is maybe a short sidestep, but I don't know if you've been reading the wins, Nancy or Sarah. And does that make sense to focus on those things?
absolutely. I think, at least from my perspective, I think that our practices are so much more than, I guess the artifacts that we produce. And sometimes the wins might seem really insignificant, but it might be just somebody coming around to a way of working, or it might be, a really good conversation that you've had with a stakeholder. And I think that, um, yeah, if you're not recognizing some of those smaller invisible, like, almost invisible wins, it does really feel like you're fighting, you're pushing a rock up against a mountain, and it's not really progressing. So I think, yeah, it is really important to ground your work in some of those smaller wins. And sharing them is a way of doing that, right? Because you can read them and you can go, oh my gosh, actually, that was similar to a win that I had 3 weeks ago that I didn't realize was a win. What do you
Exactly.
think, Sarah?
Yeah. So, what is your take on that?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I've learned so much from the other circlers that it's just nice to have that extra bit of context and see what people are doing kind of day to day and their little wins. I'm kind of hoping that we'll see more and more kind of follow-ups, especially from like the water cooler sessions which is the one where we share sort of some challenges that we're having day to day. So it's a nice kind of counterpoint to that. And I'm hoping that we'll see more people come in and be like, oh, do you remember that water cooler challenge? Actually, I've had a little win because that's been a little bit
Mm,
resolved, or I found this way around. And you get to learn then. I think what I like about the wins is that you get to learn what other people are doing that's successful that you can steal.
mm,
And it's, I don't know, it's really on the one side, you see the success in the form of a case study, or we're always looking for best practices, but somehow in our conversations in the community, we really quickly focus on the challenges and like what are the struggles. And
We're
uh,
problem solvers, aren't we?
we're
It's like
problem
natural.
solvers, so we're looking for problems. Yeah. And it seems that like best practices, once things get complicated enough, a recipe or best practice almost isn't applicable. It's always nuanced, detailed, like um
mm,
and that's why I think those sharing those small wins, recognizing that you're making, it's not even small progress, but that you are making progress, that this is what progress looks like in service design. I think even I dare to say, educating service design professionals, what does success, what does progress look like? I think we've been
mm,
maybe misled in some form to see success in a way that is almost unobtainable, unachievable. I don't know. Sarah,
mm,
does that resonate?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot of things I see where it's kind of a published success story or a published case study, and you read a research paper or whatever, and there's little times when you're like, is that all true? And would you share it if it wasn't a success? And actually, I think the day-to-day wins are more impactful. For me,
mm,
like they're the sort of the little things that are kind of very realistic. They're very day-to-day. You can learn from them. Whereas I think sometimes the big wins are a little inflated.
Exactly. Yeah, we there aren't many places where we see those small wins. Like we don't celebrate them, we don't appreciate them, we don't recognize them. Are you looking differently at your wins nowadays, Nancy?
yeah, I think definitely. And definitely, I think, in the current context that I'm in as well, where, it is a big organization, and it does, I think the phrase is big, big ships take a long time to turn, comes to mind. But, and it can feel a little bit exhausting, if you have come from maybe slightly smaller, more, um, younger organizations that are looking to kind of, to have change come through quickly and impactfully. So, it's definitely something that I've had to calibrate just in terms of what do wins look like,
Mm.
depending on the context that you're in, um, and yeah, I think you're right, Mark, in terms of maybe we are misled. And I feel like, as you were saying, what does success look like? I'm like, that's what, most of the project briefs have. And so I think it's really easy to kind of tie your success in your practice to your success in your projects when actually they're two quite different things, and can't be measured up against each other. And so
Yeah.
we really need to kind of separate those things. Mm.
It's like if your project brief is to run a marathon in your personal record time. Um, that's true, and once you get there, it's very measurable whether or not you've gotten there. But like the year of training, if
Mm,
you don't appreciate the fact that you got up this morning and ran at 6 a.m. for I don't know how many miles, like if you don't appreciate that, the chance that you'll burn out along the way and never even get to running the full marathon is pretty high, especially if you're not
mm,
surrounded by other runners, and in this case, service design professionals in your organization who are cheering you on and supporting you.
mm, mm.
And I think that's way
Yeah.
more important. Getting up every morning at 6 a.m., putting on your shoes and running.
Yeah, I feel like we've had a couple of, well, I feel like it's nearly all of the dinner table sessions where people come out and go, wow, that was like a therapy session. But I wonder if we need to be like, wow, that was like running a marathon together, or like that was like doing some training.
And I think that's
Hmm,
super important because when you have a team around you, I think this is the dynamic that happens locally.
hmm,
Nowadays, it's hard to find service design peers around you, especially if you're working remote. So with the circle, I think this is like some form of extended service design team or peers that give you that sanity check and that mental
hmm,
support, and we're all in the same struggle. Yeah. For
hmm,
anyone who's listening, I realized, and we're using terms like dinner table and water cooler. Those are formats that we have in our community. We do different types of engagements every month. If you want to know more about that, be sure to check out the link to the circle in the show notes. We're going to continue the Seed and Scale season for one more month. After that, we're moving into humanity and tech, which is also going to be super interesting. Um, so let's wrap this part of the conversation up, and I want to transition into a few of the intrinsities of being in-house specifically. I think that's a lot of fun to explore as well. Sara, if I start with you, so you came into service design without uh, prior agency or consultancy expertise or experience in service design. How, I don't know, did you have any expectations about what it would be to be doing in house specifically? And if so, how does it differ to what you expected?
Um, no, I didn't have any expectations. I'd seen jobs in agencies, and I think what drew me more towards the in-house roles was that I'm very kind of purpose driven. I need to know what I'm going to be working on and who it's going to help, and I'll be. This is a really bad thing to say for if any future person is going to hire me, they're not going to read this, but I can't get my brain to work if it doesn't seem like a valuable project, you know what I mean? And the thought of ending up in an agency where I could be given something that was kind of, I don't know, not useful, sort of meaningless to me. It wasn't going to help anybody in like kind of the meaningful way that I want. I just felt like I wouldn't be able to do it because it takes so much creativity, doesn't it? And you need that motivation. And I sort of thought, you know what, in-house, if it's with an organization that, has a real purpose that I can get behind,
Hmm.
then whatever I'm doing, it will be contributing to that organization's mission, the charity's sort of overall goal. So I think that was my expectation, and I think it has been borne true. That's been my experience anyway. Everything that I'm involved with, I can see that I'm contributing to something, even if it's something small where somebody just asked me to come in and help them with a little bit of user research. I've been asked to do a little bit of um, I was asked to do some qualitative analysis of a survey that somebody had done. So it wasn't really even service design. It was just using a skill that I'd, developed as part of service design. And then we turned that into a a poster to take to a medical conference. And it was then I got to sort of chat to people presenting this poster, chatting to people who hadn't kind of come across those kind of insights before, and we're going to take them away into their kind of medical practice. And it's things like that. Every little thing all contributes to the bigger goal of the organization. That's what I love, I think, about being in-house, especially in
Mm.
a health charity like mine, is that every small thing makes a difference. We don't waste any time, we don't waste any capacity. Everything we do is really valuable and meaningful. I just love being part of it.
Right. That's absolutely great. And I wish every company, organization had a purpose to actually make our lives better, to take care of our planet, and not just, be profitable at the same time, but not just focus on being profitable. Nancy, you have some sort of similar route as Sarah, not coming from a traditional service design school, coming from architecture, um, no prior service design agency experience. Like, did you have an expectation of what in-house service design would be like?
No, not really. I think I didn't have um, much of an expectation, but I think in one of my previous roles, I have worked with agency designers, and I guess there's a real, um, I think with all the challenges that we experience as in-house service designers, we actually have such opportunity that I think is really uh, that is I think is probably not as common in agency work, in that I feel like you have the ability to really kind of build your relationships with your stakeholders, and you have, I guess, this real opportunity to have a bit of a bird's eye view of what is happening within your organization. And so I think that is I've found that kind of what gets my brain to tick, right? To like really get it moving and thinking of all the opportunities that you can start to create with that, in-house knowledge that you wouldn't get if you were to just kind of fly in, concentrate on a specific problem, and then kind of fly out. And so, I think that sometimes that agency work is absolutely needed to kind of get things moving or to get fresh perspectives. But there's definitely, I think, a benefit of having in-house service designers, and it's definitely, I think, a more there's more depth, I think, to the interactions that you're having within the organization as well.
I'm thinking about what Sarah just mentioned. Nancy, Sarah mentioned the fact that she needs to be in a context where there is a clear purpose
Mm.
on the challenges that she's working on. My question to you would be, okay, so purpose is one of the ingredients to make service design work. I'm curious, from your experience so far, what would you say is an absolute key skill to have as an in-house service designer?
Um, I think it would be, I think, at least from my perspective, I think that relation building with stakeholders is just absolutely key. I think we come into these spaces where we're not the experts. We rely on the knowledge and the skills and the experience from others. And so, if building those relationships to be able to kind of have productive, collaborative working relationships are really important. And so I think that is probably a skill that I've always had, but never realized how important that ability to kind of bring people in and along the journey and kind of guide them through um, what uh, what the service design journey is going to be. so that they're kind of, there's always going to be surprises along the way. But so when those surprises do come up, they're not as shocking,
What I'm curious about is you mentioned, okay, relationship building, and you also said that's maybe a skill that I've always had that
Mm,
almost touches upon talent rather than a skill. So
mm,
are you actively developing your relationship building skills? And if so,
mm.
how?
Yeah, good question. I think, yeah, you caught me. Um, I think maybe what I'm developing is the ability to shift in the way that I work. So depending on what's going to be working with, what's going to work best with the person or the group of people that I'm working with. So having, not being the one trick pony to come in and, do the crazy eights, but actually thinking, well, what's the best way to work with this person? And that's going to be productive for both of us in a way that is not going to, feel repetitive or like feel like it's pulling out teeth. And so maybe that's the skill that is being refined. There is, I think having, trying to really understand stakeholders in a way that is makes doing what we do a lot easier.
Junior service designer came up to you and said, Nancy, I really want to get better with my
Mm,
relationship building skills.
mm.
Like, what's the advice you'd give them? How would I grow?
That's a good question, Mark. Uh, Maybe like treat your relationships with your stakeholders a little bit like a discovery process itself. I think, try and do your research, go and treat those relationships as a way to kind of learn about how certain stakeholders work and what works best for them, what's important to them, what are their needs, what do they, what don't they care about, and use that as a way to kind of guide how you work with them.
That's very practical. Treating relationship building as a research project. I like that. Sarah, next to relationship building, I'm curious. One is if you sort of recognize and agree with that, and if so, like, what's the other skill that you'd say is vital for being an effective in-house service design professional?
I definitely agree with that, and I think it kind of reminds me of the other dinner table session I did that was around kind of relationship building using we're talking about using the systems thinking pyramid or the iceberg to kind of understand the mental models of your stakeholders and kind of understand what's going on under the surface and how you can understand what they care about and work with them a bit better. So I definitely agree. The other thing I think is probably going to be the same kind of it's a talent rather than a skill, but I would say curiosity. I think that's the main thing. Um, that if I look at the difference that I make to a project, if I ever make a difference, it seems to be coming in and asking questions that maybe haven't occurred to everybody in the room, or that sometimes it might just be that not everybody has the confidence to ask, or not everybody feels comfortable being the awkward one to ask the question. But the curiosity to ask the questions and keep picking until you get the answer. Not other people, that goes against the relationship building, but keep researching and keep trying to find it out, is probably the other thing.
In love with the question rather than the answer. Which brings us to a nice moment in this conversation. Um, we will be having follow-up conversations with fellow circle members, with other service design, in-house service design professionals. Sarah, sticking to your theme of curiosity, if you'd be in my spot, like, what's the question you'd ask them? And this is also, of course, to everybody who's listening, like, what's the question you'd ask us?
Oh, I don't know. Oh, now you stumped me. I'm not going to be able to think of anything.
Is there, I'll get back to you in a second. Nancy, is there a question you'd have for a fellow in-house service design professional?
Oh, I thought I had a little bit more time, but
Sorry.
let me think. I feel like it is uh maybe something around what, like, what has we talked about moving beyond that prove phase, and I think and maybe it's something actually Sarah might give you a call later on and find out about. But yeah, what are some of the examples where you are at scale, and what has worked, what's kind of gotten you there, um, uh, and uh, and yeah, how what was required to kind of have that set up in a way that it's kind of moved from one phase, that prove phase, to that scale phase. Um, yeah, that's probably something that I kind of set out to ask it at the dinner table, but um, I think that we had more important conversations to have.
Mm.
So yeah.
Uh, every conversation is important. So
Mm,
that's why we get together at least once a month, because there is so
yeah.
much to discuss. Okay, so what did you do to get to the scale phase? And if you aren't there yet, like maybe what is the biggest roadblock or struggle, or what's the thing that
Mm.
needs to be overcome? Cool. Okay, Sarah, you had a few moments to think about a question. Did anything emerge?
Only just to agree with Nancy. Yeah, if there's anybody out there that is working at those later stages of the design maturity model, just what does your organization look like? What does your day-to-day work look like? What are the what are the ways that you know you're at that scale stage, and how did you get there? I think the other thing maybe is yeah, anybody who can answer those kind of questions that keep coming up around visibility and measurement. Somebody's got really good ways to sort of measure the impact that their service design practices has made. I'd really love to hear about that.
Are very soon going to do an expert session with Stacey Barr, who's been on the service design show before, and she's a measurement expert. So I think we should find and seek knowledge in areas and fields that go beyond service design, because a lot of people have figured out a lot of stuff that we are looking for. So we just need to create some of these bridges. Um, okay, cool. Sarah, any final words of wisdom that you'd like to share with us?
I don't think I have a lot of wisdom to offer. Just sort of thank you for having me on the show, and for anybody who's listening, if you're not part of the circle, I definitely recommend it. Um, it's just, I think, like Nancy said earlier, sometimes it can be a little bit of a therapy session, but it is really nice to know that you're not alone with a lot of the challenges. Actually, there's a lot of things that come up where it's really easy to feel like it's your own failing, that you're not representing the profession. You're not, practicing it well enough, so you're not getting it over the line. Nancy, I think you said about kind of sometimes if the project doesn't come to, if you don't meet the goals of your project, then you can feel like you've sort of not, achieved the thing. But actually, there's a lot that you put in that's still worthwhile. And then hearing from other people, they might have tried the same things, done all the same things, but theirs succeeded because it was some external factor. It just, it really
Mm.
helps put things into perspective and help to kind of see from other people what you're doing well and what you can learn from.
For the endorsement. Let's see how many signups we get after this episode. Nancy, also, this is your space and time to share any final words.
Yeah, I mean, I think that maybe just going back to what I said a little bit earlier around using these models are really helpful, but I think also acknowledging that they do kind of bring up frustration and like a bit of a doomy feeling around us. So just remembering to look at the smaller wins, look at the wins, look at just what's moving, and I can recognize that things kind of happen slowly as well, um, and that's okay, because I think from a lot of the conversations that we have within the circle, but also in other, areas in service design. I think that's normal, and just looking after ourselves, I guess, while we kind of watch things grow.
I totally agree. Let's look out and after each other. Super important. We need more service design professionals, not less. So let's make sure we stay in the game. Sara, Nancy, thanks for coming on, sharing your experience, your wisdom, your challenges, your lessons. Thanks for hosting some very interesting conversations in the Circle community. Thank you for being a member and contributing to this podcast and also to that community. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Sara and Nancy and that you are walking away with some fresh perspective on navigating the challenges and celebrating the wins of in-house work. If there are stories about the endless proof stage, the power of treating relationship building like a discovery project, or maybe the marathon analogy for making progress resonated with you, I'd love to hear about it. Please leave a comment on this episode on Spotify or YouTube. And if this conversation has got you thinking about how valuable it would be to connect with other in-house service design professionals for those deep, honest discussions that help you navigate your own challenges, then we'd love to welcome you into our Circle community. In the Circle, you will find a passionate group of smart, generous, and experienced professionals who meet every month to share wins, failures, and hard-earned lessons. It's all about pushing each other forward and getting that encouragement when you most need it. To learn more about the Circle and how you can join us, head over to servicedesignshow.com/circle. That's servicedesignshow.com/circle. And of course, you'll find that link in the show notes. Thanks a lot for tuning in to the Service Design Show. My name is Mark Fontijn. Take care and see you soon.